WCNC-TV Charlotte. This is Flashpoint, where power and politics collide and the tough questions get asked and answered. Now your host, Dave Wagner.
Well, the deadline is come and gone. Congress is home and the sequester is upon us, and the White House says that's a problem.
And let's be clear, none of this is necessary. It's happening because a choice that Republicans in Congress have made. They've allowed these cuts to happen because they refuse to budge on closing a single wasteful loophole to help reduce the deficit.
According to the White House, 350 North Carolina teachers and teachers' aides could lose their jobs. 22,000 Department of Defense workers in North Carolina could be furloughed. Child care funding could go away for 1,300 kids. And the White House says there's more. Everything from airports to vaccines to meals for seniors.
It's going to mean hundreds of thousands of jobs lost. That is real. That's not we're not making that up. That's not a scare tactic. That's a fact.
There has been a tremendous hysteria put on by the administration, by President Obama and his team, to try to get people all worked up. That's really not reality. Yes, you're going to see some inconvenience, but nothing compared to what's been conveyed.
North Carolina Congressman Robert Pittenger says bigger, more painful cuts have to be made to entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare.
I am prepared to do hard things and to push my Democratic friends to do hard things. But what I can't do is ask middle-class families, ask seniors, ask students to bear the entire burden of deficit reduction when we know we've got a bunch of tax loopholes that are benefiting the well-off and the well-connected, aren't contributing to growth, aren't contributing to our economy. It's not fair, it's not right. The American people don't think it's fair and don't think it's right.
And joined us today, Congressman Robert Pittenger, City Councilman Michael Barnes, and Eric Spanberg from the Charlotte Business Journal. The president says people will be hurt by this. You said in the interview that we did with you that this was an inconvenience. Why the difference in opinion here? Well,
you know, the president's traveled about 5,300 miles in the last few weeks, creating this grave concern for the country. I wish the president had traveled about 1.5 miles down the road and just talked to Harry Reid and responded back to the two proposals that the Republicans in the House have passed and that offered alternatives to what we're doing right now. I think that would have been a lot more reasonable. You know, the American people, they want an accountable government. They want an efficient government. They want an effective government. And they've taken a 2% tax increase in their payroll checks. I think the federal government can take a 2% cut in what it spends. And that's what we're looking for.
Eric?
Well, I mean, look, it's been an interesting week. I think that most people who are in the middle, and even some on both sides, would say that neither side really made much of a legitimate effort this week. And of course, it didn't look good that Congress went home. You know, obviously a lot of people were headed to Selma, but
well, they requested to go to Selma.
Right, no, and I understand that, but I think people that are watching this play out, you know that the train wreck is coming, and yet really very little got done. There was a meeting at the White House. Everybody walked out and said, no, we don't really agree. But what's interesting is, you know, Speaker Boehner, who has been in, you know, somewhat of hot water early this year, now it seems like the Republicans have lined up pretty united behind him, so they like what he's doing. The only people that are truly unhappy, I think, right now are the citizens at large.
Let's be fair, though. I don't have the benefit of being in Washington with the congressman, but we know that...
Come on up and join us.
Maybe one day, right? We know that from the time Obama was elected in 2008, that there were people who said, we want to make sure he's a one-term president. Senator Mitch McConnell said it, Michelle Bachmann said it, and in 2010, I'm sorry, when they took over the Congress, they said, look, he is going to be a one-termer. So these are people who have never had any intentions of working with the president for the benefit of the country. I wish we could get, and by the way, we have the same issues locally, but I wish we could get our elected officials in Charlotte and Raleigh and Washington to work together for the benefit of the people of this country. And I actually think there probably are some cuts that could be made. But the fact of the matter is, if we're not working together, and what we hear on the local level, Congressman, is that Boehner and McConnell won't even meet with the president when he tries to meet with them.
They went today. They've gone every time that they've been invited. I think the concern, Michael, that people have Dave, is that, we have $1 trillion annual deficits. We have over a $6 trillion greater debt than when the president took office. That has an impact on where people are living today. Has a heavy burden on our economy. The interest that we're paying on that. Interest rates have been kept very low by the Fed. When they start to rise, that increase in the load on our economy is going to be even greater. I don't care who you talk to, Peter O'Rourke, the president's budget advisor, or Erskine Bowles, they'll tell you that the path that we're on, the spending that we're on is unsustainable.
Right. Erskine Bowles will say that the sequester is a disaster. It's a big mistake. He'll say that at the same time. So I guess, when you look at the American people here, there's frustration because it's like Washington's still, mired in this, inability to be able to do anything.
Well, remember, Dave, that when we had the Bowles-Simpson Commission, one of the people that voted against it was Paul Ryan, who is, the Republican budget wonk. I mean, he's the face of budget matters to the nation. And so that is why you have this constant frustration, I think, as people look at Washington.
And Erskine, if you've seen the video, complimented Paul Ryan and when he spoke up at University of North Carolina because of what he had done to present a plan. We have a plan to balance this budget in 10 years. We don't want to put greater tax burden on the American people. The load that they're carrying right now is one of the great impediments that we have. We need to cut spending. When I was with Peter O'Rourke, who again was Mr. Obama's top person, he said, and this is a broad group of Democrat and Republican freshmen at one of our conferences, he said, unless you deal with the debt, you're playing games with the country. Unless you deal with what we do with entitlements, you're playing games with the debt, and you better go fix it. And that's what we've been trying to do.
Well, but since 2010, the president has reduced the deficit by $2.5 trillion. He's added another $1.5 trillion in proposed cuts that you guys won't apparently embrace. I've seen this report on their plan. $600 billion of that was as a result of the lapse of the Bush tax cuts, but there was $1.5 trillion or so that was there.
$1 a year to our deficit.
We are adding to it, but my point is that the president has made proposals that have been completely rejected by the Congress, and it's so bad, in fact, that when he has made proposals and accepted things that the Republicans in Congress have agreed with, they reject them.
I hear you.
What is wrong, though, with eliminating some of those loopholes and tax cuts for the wealthiest of Americans?
I'm all for it.
You are for that?
Absolutely. I'm for eliminating loopholes and lowering the tax rate that'll really increase economic growth.
But eliminating tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans, or are you?
It's the loopholes. You have special interest groups. You have thousands of attorneys in Washington, D.C. It's corporate welfare, and they go after and they help those specific groups and individuals. Absolutely, that's not fair. We need a fair tax code, and I believe we ought to eliminate these loopholes and this increase inequity and provide a lower rate for everybody.
All right. Well, the governors of North and South Carolina, they visited the White House this past week, and the president told them he's working to find a solution. Republican governors say there is too much finger-pointing going on. Here's what Nikki Haley had to say.
How many more times are the governors going to have to pick up the mess of Washington, D.C.? How many more times are we going to have to deal with these issues over and over again because of the finger pointing and the blame game that keeps on happening in Washington? What I will tell you is we heard today a whole lot of no.
Governor McCrory issued a statement after the meeting. In North Carolina, we're making tough decisions, setting clear priorities to fix our economy and make government more efficient and effective. We ask our leaders in Washington, D.C. to do the same. Congressman, have you spoken at all to Governor McCrory about this at all? Has he expressed any concern to you?
I was with him last week. I was at the governor's conference. Yes, we're all concerned about it. That's what we are about. We want a sound, accountable government. And that's what the American people want. And that's what I'm there to work for. And frankly, I'm doing that in a bipartisan way. I have reached out to my Democrat colleagues in the freshman class, and we have worked very hard together. We wrote a letter, 35 of us signed it, that went to the president and went to the congressional leadership saying we have to deal with our problem. that's really impeding the growth of our country and impacting American families.
Eric, do you think in some ways that governors face more political damage from these sequester cuts than perhaps members of Congress do?
Yeah, when we're not dealing with the possum drop here in North Carolina. No, but you know, really it is. It's at the state level and the local level. It hits so much closer to home. Because obviously those are your local services. We're all aware if people aren't getting Social Security checks, yes, that hurts. We haven't gotten to that point yet. But this local and state is really heating up. Michael can tell you, I mean, everyone in town is talking about this divide and this lack of progress.
There is, and you know, a lot of the problems that we're having in Raleigh are self-inflicted. The decline of the expansion of Medicaid, the money that the federal government was going to send for that is a problem. I was talking to a hospital executive earlier this week who said, you know, those people who don't have insurance are going to have to come in here. We're going to have to treat them. So the people are really going to pay for this indirectly because we're just going to pass the costs on to our other patients and insurance companies. So, you know, we have to get smart about how we are leading and how we are helping the state to grow. And the bad part, just speaking again from the local perspective, what we worry about here is that the cuts that you all are proposing will cut education, will increase costs for working families, but will take care of millionaires and billionaires. So I'm actually relieved to hear you say that you're interested in closing some of those loopholes that wealthy people are taking advantage of.
Well, and particularly when you hear the business community crying foul about taxes all the time, while there's some truth to that, remember, a lot of those loopholes are corporate loopholes.
All right, well, coming up here, the battle over control of Charlotte Douglas Airport heats up this week. There's a fierce fight between city council and state lawmakers. But first, a quick check on your weather from the First Warren Storm Center. 4 months after the elections, dysfunction and divisiveness aren't disappearing on Capitol Hill. And despite promises for bipartisanship in Raleigh, Democrats say they have very little voice. Let's talk about Capitol Hill. Is it as divisive as it appears to the American public?
You know, Dave, when my wife and I took this move to Washington, we made a commitment that we were going to reach out, not just to folks on my side of the aisle, but on the other side. And we've had probably a half a dozen conferences, bipartisan, with our freshman class. There's about 80 of us. And spent a lot of time with each other. And we got to know each other very, very well. As a result of that, what has come out has been a caucus of bipartisan freshmen that we are committed to work together on real solutions. In fact, it's called United Solutions. And I co-chair this effort with Congressman from Murphy from Florida. And we've had our first initiative, and we'll continue. But it's about relationships. And you have to be willing to sit down and know people. You can't reject somebody that you really get to know. So there's a lot of hostility over personalities, and you never hear each other talk.
Don't you think, though, sometimes when you release statements attacking the president or attacking the Democrats as somehow being unwilling to budge, that gives the impression to the public here at home that, you know, it's the same old politics, really. They really don't get along. And don't you think sometimes it sends that message to people here in your district?
Well, sure it does. I mean, you're looking at trying to move policy along, but you can move it along a lot better if you have built relationships with people. Somebody asked a senior senator, maybe I think it was John Stennis, what has happened in Washington, D.C., transformed this city more than anything? He said the jet airplane, because the members left town. They went back to the district. They didn't spend time with each other. Our founding fathers, on up through recent years, they were together all the time. They worked together. They had relationships. And that's what we need to be about. And that's really what I'm a relationship person. When I was in Raleigh, I pursued relationships. Sure, I argued and fought with the majority leader, Tony Rand, or Mark Basnight, but I pursued them in relationships, and we were able to do some things together. Yes, I deferred to them. Yes, they carried the ball across the goal line, but I didn't care. I didn't care who scored. Let's just get the job done.
Michael, I mean, we're seeing this at the local level, too, where things aren't necessarily working as effectively at city council as you would hope they might.
And it's very frustrating, and to the point the Congressman made, what people want us to do is compromise, work together, and figure out how to do what's best for, in my case, for the people of Charlotte. And it's really challenging. You have, in our case, within the party, you have disputes. In Washington, they seem to be to be more across party lines, but people really want us to take the time to figure out how to do what's in the best interest of the country or the city or the state, and we have been failing to do that lately.
At the state level, I mean, we certainly see that. Democrats were told that they would be, their ideas would be welcome. They don't feel that way right now.
Well, and Republicans waited a long time. As the congressman knows, he was there as part of the minority party. He knows they've waited a long time to be able to set, right, to set the agenda. So, I mean, it isn't a surprise. The other thing that's going on here, though, clearly, is that there's not as much money, and so that makes it that much harder.
All right. Need to take a break. Back with more in just a moment. All right, let's talk about our next big story. Michael?
I think the big deal for us this week will be whether or not the state Senate moves forward with the taking the airport away from Charlotte.
Yeah, taking it away. All right, Congressman?
We're going to need to do a continuing resolution probably next week. As you know, the U.S. Senate has not passed a budget in 4 years. We need to do this to keep funding in place so that we do not have the real crisis that people are assuming that is going to take place.
All right, Eric?
Curious to see Governor McCrory offer some opinions on both the Panthers and the airport, those two big issues, so maybe that will be coming soon.
Well, he spent a little time with Reverend Billy Graham, so maybe got a few prayers from Reverend Graham. Maybe some help from above.
World these days.
He'll help the home team.
Let's hope so. All right, well, thanks to Congressman Robert Pittenger, Charlotte City Councilman Michael Barnes, Eric Spanberg from the Charlotte Business Journal. Thanks to you as well. We hope to see you next week for Flashpoint.